Mario 3 is probably my favorite game of all time. I have so many memories of playing it as a kid, and even now I think it holds up as a great game by today's standards. So I thought it would be a perfect candidate for my series where I recreate game art using Inkscape and the Godot engine. Link to the playlist in the description. But I didn't want to just do a straight HD remaster, though. I feel like that wouldn't make much of a difference with Mario 3's art style. Plus, modern emulators already have powerful filters that simulate that look pretty well. Instead, I focused on the unique concept behind Mario 3. Unlike any other main Mario game, this one is styled like a stage play, and a lot of its assets reflect that idea, like vaulted platforms, artificial looking bushes, and end of level curtains, or whatever this is. Not everything follows that logic, sure, but the intention is definitely there. So I thought, what if I push that concept as far as possible using modern tools? And this is the end result. If you've seen my other videos, you know I usually do a Godot mockup to show how the asset might look in an actual game in movement. I didn't do that this time. What you see here is just a static image. Not because of the assets, those are mostly done, but because I didn't have the time for making all the animations, enemies, and gameplay logic. I'd seriously love to turn this into a playable level, but there's a lot of work and I can only justify the time if this video gets enough interest. So if you want to see more, like, comment, and subscribe. Maybe even share it with a friend. Who knows, if there is enough support, I might end up releasing a public demo of the first level, and maybe even more levels after that if people like it. Anyway, I wanted to dive a bit deeper into how I imagine a full remake of Mario 3 could look if it was truly committed to the concept. As you saw in the mockup, I fully embraced the stage play theme. I don't think the original game pushed that idea as far as it could have, maybe because they didn't have the technology to make the sprite art, or most likely they wanted to strike a balance between the concept and clarity. Even the SNES remake, with much more power, toned it down by adding more traditional Mario backgrounds that fight back the whole idea of a stage play. As much as I love Mario All-Stars, I think the fact they had to remake 4 games meant they had a lot of technical limitations that probably kept them from going all in a single game. I want this project to go all in, pushing even further those ideas and further reinforcing the concept. That means stage lights, curtains, visible seats, all those little theater details, even during gameplay. Of course, if some of those get too distracting, they may need tweaking, but the goal is to lean into the concept hard. To make things more fun, maybe it can be not a particularly well-funded play. Maybe some props are old and broken. The sets are chipped, the walls are badly painted. That kind of visual storytelling adds charm, and it makes everything more interesting. Broken things are always more fun to watch. It is such an interesting concept, it's easy to make your imagination run with it. Maybe there are different seed character silhouettes, like Toads, Peach, and Luigi, which could only show on certain levels. Maybe even Bowser can be there. And just like in Paper Mario, maybe they could react to what's happening on the level with a few animations, like everyone cheering when Mario finishes a level or getting surprised when Mario dies. And certain characters could have unique animations, like Bowser could just boo and show his thumb down when Mario finishes a level or gains a life. More ideas. Maybe the underwater levels could take place in a giant transparent water tank, like those in a science museum. The overworld map could be a badly hand-painted cardboard diorama, with bushes animated by the toads in costumes. Maybe, if you want to go wild, even Mario himself could be a toad in a badly made costume, with seams and googly eyes and clunky props. The possibilities are endless. Once you fully embrace the stage play idea, it's almost impossible not to let your imagination run wild. Regarding the illustration itself, I don't want to get stuck going over every detail. This isn't really meant to be a tutorial, but since this is an Inkscape channel, I thought I'd share a few tricks I used to get this look. The techniques are actually pretty basic, but super fun to experiment with. Originally, I wanted to go for a more traditional cel-shaded cartoon style. I felt that fit really well with the older 2D Mario games. I went ahead and completed the illustration in that style, and this is the end result. I think it looks fine, but maybe because of the tons of Paper Mario and Yoshi's Crafted World references I gathered, I started to wonder if it would look more interesting with a slightly more realistic rendering, something with textures and soft shadows. The first technique I used a lot was just simple gradients. Adding a gradient from light to dark instantly gives things more volume, and I use this pretty much everywhere. Even small changes in the color value can make a huge difference. The second big technique was texture overlays. I applied textures across entire objects, and by combining them with blend modes and tweaking opacity, I got a nice effect. It's not ultra realistic, but it really works for this case. For example, I use a cardboard texture on the hills, and I think it makes a huge difference. Same with the wood. I used a wood texture for anything meant to look wooden. And by the way, that wood texture is a vector texture, not a raster one, so it's way more flexible in Inkscape. If you're interested, I have a completely free Inkscape starter pack with over 170 hand-drawn vector textures and other beginner-friendly assets. Link in the description. I don't normally use masks in my workflow. I don't usually need them for the projects I work on, but I made a lot of use of Inkscape's inverse mask path effect. You'll notice the wooden boards have a chipped paint effect. This was done by placing a vector texture on top and applying the inverse mask. It hides all the darker areas of the texture, making it look like the paint has worn off. Super useful for adding that worn out, scrappy look. Next, the soft shadows. I use the trick of drawing the shadow shape and then applying a blur. It's a classic, but it always works for creating that soft shading that really helps with depth. Finally, I did something I almost never do. I experimented with filters. I wanted the green pipe to have a rough crayon texture drawing. There are a bunch of ways to do this. You could even use path effects, but I stumbled across a filter called Chalk and Sponge. I had to fiddle with the parameters using the filter editor, which I'm not super familiar with, but after some tweaking, it gave me exactly the crayon-like effect I wanted. So that was an overview of the tools I used to get a more textured, realistic look. If you compare the two versions side by side, the same drawing, the same colors, the textured one just feels more alive. It feels like it fit with the concept more, at least in my opinion. This final version may seem that it's more complicated to do, but in fact it wasn't harder to draw, at all. It was more time consuming, but not harder. You can too, if you want. Start using Inkscape to make your game art. All you need is some basic training, and for that, you have this channel. Make sure to check out my last video where I go over the best resources to start drawing with Inkscape. Also, I'll leave you a link to my step-by-step beginner-oriented tutorial playlist, perfect to get you started. Also, don't forget you can get my free Inkscape starter pack, which has all the textures I use in this project, and a few more useful things for beginners, especially if you plan to follow my tutorials. Also, if you truly want to learn and master Inkscape, this is probably the last week I'm leaving my 13 courses pack at the current discount price. That's over 70 hours of tutorials on game art, character design, background design, rendering and more, at a really strong discount. So make sure to get it before the price goes up. This is currently the best way to support the channel and help me keep making free tutorials. If you want to see this turned into a full playable demo, you know what to do. Like, comment, subscribe, and share the video. If it doesn't happen, no problem. I have plenty of tutorials and remake ideas planned for the channel, so stick around if that sounds interesting to you. That's all for now. I hope you enjoyed this little video. See you the next week. Bye.